A human helped an old alien pick up his groceries, not knowing he once ruled over half the galaxy. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Rain poured relentlessly from the gray skies of New Seattle, the first human colony on Proxima Centauri b, as Ethan Cole hurried down the crowded street. The neon lights of alien and human establishments alike reflected in puddles beneath his worn boots, creating a kaleidoscope of colors against the otherwise dreary backdrop. Ethan wasn't having a good day. Actually, he hadn't had a good day in about 3 months, not since he'd been laid off from his position at the Interstellar Communications Array. Budget cuts, they'd said. Nothing personal. Just the reality of the economy after the Galactic Trade Agreement had been adjusted. Now he was scraping by on odd jobs and delivery gigs, barely making enough to afford his tiny apartment in the human sector of New Seattle. The notification on his wrist device pinged again, reminding him that he was running late for a delivery. If he didn't make it on time, his rating would drop, and he couldn't afford that. Not when so many humans were competing for the same gigs. He quickened his pace, dodging past a group of Moralians, their translucent bodies glowing faintly blue in the dim light. That's when he nearly collided with an elderly alien. The creature, a Vantaran, Ethan thought, though he wasn't great at identifying all the species that inhabited the sprawling city, had dropped a bag of groceries, colorful fruits and vegetables scattered across the wet pavement. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said immediately, kneeling down to help collect the items. His delivery notification pinged again, more urgently this time. He ignored it. The old Vantaran looked at him with 4 amber eyes, 2 large and 2 small, arranged vertically on a face covered in fine gray scales. He wore simple clothing, nothing that would mark him as particularly important or wealthy. Just another resident trying to get by in the massive melting pot that was New Seattle. "Thank you, young human," the alien said in perfect English, his voice surprisingly deep and melodious. "These old hands aren't what they used to be." Ethan smiled as he gathered up what looked like exotic fruits, their surfaces iridescent and shifting colors in the neon lights. "No problem at all. Here, let me help you carry these home. Where do you live?" The old Vantaran hesitated for a moment before pointing with a 3-fingered hand down a side street. "Not far. Just 2 blocks that way. But I wouldn't want to impose." Ethan glanced at his wrist device. The delivery was already going to be late. What difference would a few more minutes make? "It's not an imposition," he said, picking up the nari-filled bag. "Lead the way." As they walked, the old alien introduced himself. "My name is Zarek," he said, his pace slow but steady. "I've lived in this neighborhood for about 5 of your Earth years." "I'm Ethan. Been here for about 3 years myself, since right after graduation. Came out for a job that..." He trailed off, not wanting to delve into his current unemployment situation. "Well, let's just say things change." Zarek nodded sagely. "Indeed they do, young Ethan. Indeed they do." They turned down another street, this one quieter, less crowded. The buildings here were older, from the first wave of construction when the colony was established 20 years earlier. Many housed a mix of species, though some areas tended to be dominated by one group or another. "This is it," Zarek said, stopping in front of a modest apartment building. It wasn't in the best repair, but it wasn't in the worst part of town either. "3rd floor. I'm afraid the elevator isn't working today." Ethan adjusted his grip on the grocery bag. "No problem. I could use the exercise." As they climbed the stairs, Ethan noticed that despite his apparent age, Zarek moved with a certain grace, a kind of controlled dignity that seemed at odds with his frail appearance. There was something in the way the old alien carried himself that spoke of a lifetime of command, though Ethan couldn't place why he thought that. The apartment was small but neat, furnished sparsely with a mix of human-style furniture and items that were clearly of alien origin. A large window looked out over the city, the view partially obscured by the rain, but still impressive. "Thank you for your kindness," Zarek said as Ethan set the groceries down on a counter in the kitchen area. "It's rare to find such consideration in a place like this." Ethan shrugged. It's nothing. Anyone would have done the same. Zarek's amber eyes seemed to study him intently. I don't think that's true, young human. But your modesty is commendable. He gestured to a small table with 2 chairs. Would you care for some tea before you go? I have a blend that is quite compatible with human physiology. It might help warm you up after the rain. Ethan glanced at his wrist device again. The delivery was now officially late. His rating would take a hit, but somehow, standing in this quiet apartment with the old alien, it didn't seem to matter as much as it had a few minutes ago. Sure, he said. Tea would be nice. As Zarek prepared the tea, moving about the kitchen with practiced efficiency, Ethan noticed a small metallic object on a shelf. It looked like a medal or emblem of some kind, its surface etched with intricate designs that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. That's an interesting piece, Ethan commented, nodding toward the shelf. Zarek glanced up, following Ethan's gaze. For a moment, something flickered in those amber eyes, a shadow of something vast and ancient. Then it was gone, replaced by the gentle expression of an elderly alien. Just a memento from another life, Zarek said, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. We all have our keepsakes, don't we? The tea was unlike anything Ethan had tasted before, fragrant and soothing, with complex notes that reminded him somehow of both earth spices and something entirely alien. As they drank, Zarek asked him about his life, his work, his dreams. There was something in the way the old alien listened that made Ethan open up more than he normally would with a stranger. I came here with such big plans, Ethan found himself saying. I was going to be part of the team that established reliable quantum communication between here and Earth, cut the lag time from years to minutes. But then the funding got cut, and now I'm delivering packages for barely enough to pay rent. Zarek nodded slowly. And yet you stopped to help an old alien pick up his groceries, even though you were already late for a delivery. Ethan shrugged again, slightly embarrassed. Like I said, anyone would have. I have lived a very long time, Ethan Cole, Zarek said, his voice taking on a different quality, deeper and somehow more resonant. And I can assure you, not everyone would have done what you did today. There was something in the way Zarek said his full name, which Ethan didn't remember giving, that sent a strange shiver down his spine. But before he could question it, his wrist device pinged again, this time with a message from his supervisor, asking why the delivery was still pending. I should go, Ethan said, standing up. Thank you for the tea. Zarek rose as well, escorting him to the door. No, Ethan Cole. Thank you. Perhaps we will meet again. As Ethan hurried back down the stairs and out into the rain, he couldn't shake the feeling that there had been more to that encounter than just helping an old alien with his groceries. But he had no time to dwell on it. He had a delivery to complete, and then 3 more after that if he wanted to make rent this month. The next morning, Ethan woke to find his wrist device displaying an unusual notification. It wasn't from his delivery service or any of the job boards he regularly checked. Instead, it was from a company he'd never heard of, Stellaris Innovations. The message was brief: interview opportunity. Today, 10 a.m. Address attached. Ethan stared at it in confusion. He hadn't applied to any place called Stellaris Innovations. But the address was in the corporate sector, the nice part of New Seattle where the major interstellar companies had their offices. It had to be a mistake. Or a scam. Still, he didn't have any deliveries scheduled until the afternoon, and his curiosity was piqued. What did he have to lose by checking it out? The corporate sector was a different world from the mixed neighborhoods where Ethan lived and worked. Here, the buildings were tall and gleaming, their surfaces made of smart glass that adjusted its opacity and color depending on the time of day and weather conditions. The streets were clean, the security was visible, and the population was much more homogeneous. Mostly humans and a few of the more humanoid alien species that had integrated well into Earth's corporate culture. The Stellaris Innovations building was one of the tallest in the district, its upper floors disappearing into the low clouds that still hung over the city. Ethan felt distinctly out of place as he entered the lobby, his worn jacket and boots a stark contrast to the sleek business attire of those around him. He approached the reception desk, where a human woman with an augmented reality display hovering over one eye looked up at him. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional but slightly dismissive as she took in his appearance. "I received a message about an interview," Ethan said, suddenly feeling foolish. "At 10 a.m. But I think there might be a mistake." The receptionist tapped at her holographic interface. "Name?" "Ethan Cole." Her eyebrows rose slightly as something appeared on her display. "No mistake, Mr. Cole. You're expected on the 87th floor. Executive level." She handed him a temporary access card. "The elevator will take you directly there." The elevator was made of the same smart glass as the building's exterior, providing a dizzying view of the city as it rose swiftly upward. Ethan's mind raced. Executive level? What kind of job interview was held on the executive level? This had to be some kind of elaborate mistake. Or maybe a practical joke. When the doors opened, he stepped out into a reception area that was minimalist in design, but clearly expensive. A young man sat behind a desk made of what appeared to be real wood, an extravagance on a colony world. "Mr. Cole," the man said, standing. "Please follow me. They're waiting for you." "They?" Ethan asked, but the receptionist was already leading him down a hallway to a set of double doors. The conference room beyond was dominated by a large table made of the same wood as the reception desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of New Seattle, the rain clouds now breaking up to allow shafts of sunlight to illuminate the city below. 3 people sat at the table, 2 humans and 1 alien of a species Ethan didn't recognize, with pearlescent skin and elongated features. But it was the 4th figure, standing by the window, that drew Ethan's attention. "Zarek?" he said in disbelief. The old Van Terren turned, and Ethan was struck again by that sense of dignity, of command, that seemed to emanate from him. But now, dressed in formal attire that was clearly custom-made and expensive, Zarek looked less like the frail old alien from yesterday and more like someone accustomed to power. "Welcome, Ethan Cole," Zarek said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please, join us." Still confused, Ethan took the offered seat. The 2 humans, a middle-aged man with silver at his temples and a younger woman with short, practical hair, regarded him with curious expressions. The alien's face was harder to read, but its posture suggested interest. "I believe some explanation is in order," Zarek said, moving to take his own seat at the head of the table. "Stellaris Innovations is a new venture, one that I am backing personally. We are assembling a team to work on quantum communication technology, specifically the kind of project you were involved with before your position was eliminated." Ethan stared at him. "How do you know about that?" Zarek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "I make it my business to know things, Ethan Cole, especially when I encounter someone with both technical skill and a quality of character that is rare." "I don't understand," Ethan said. "Yesterday you were just an old man who dropped his groceries. And you were just a delivery person who stopped to help," Zarek replied. "Yet here we both are, revealing ourselves to be somewhat more." The silver-haired human cleared his throat. "Perhaps introductions would help. I'm Dr. Marcus Dean, former head of quantum research at Earth's MIT. This is Dr. Lauren Bennett, who specializes in xenophysics, and Nalox, our legal and diplomatic advisor." The alien, Nalox, inclined its pearlescent head slightly in acknowledgement. "And of course, you've met Zarek," Dr. Dean continued. "Who is the primary investor and visionary behind Stellaris Innovations?" Zarek waved a 3-fingered hand dismissively. "Titles are unimportant. What matters is the work we intend to do." He fixed his amber gaze on Ethan. "We want to offer you a position, Ethan Cole. Your work at the Interstellar Communications Array was promising. We believe, with proper funding and the right team, you could help make significant advancements." Ethan's mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen in real life. "I still don't understand." "Why me? How did you even find me?" "As I said," Zarek replied, "I encountered someone with both skill and character. The former is not uncommon. The latter, especially in combination with the former, is rarer than you might think. He leaned forward slightly. You stopped to help someone who needed it, even at personal cost. That tells me something about who you are, Ethan Cole. And who you are is exactly the kind of person I want working with me. The meeting continued for almost 2 hours. They discussed the project in detail, a new approach to quantum entanglement that could potentially revolutionize interstellar communication. The salary they offered was more than Ethan had ever imagined earning, and the benefits package included housing in the corporate sector and full medical coverage. By the time he left the Stellaris Innovations building, Ethan felt like he was walking in a dream. He had a new job, a real job, doing the work he had trained for, the work he loved, all because he had stopped to help an old alien pick up his groceries. But as he made his way back to his apartment to pack his things, the company had arranged for him to move into corporate housing immediately. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Zarek than met the eye. The way the others had deferred to him, the resources at his disposal, the knowledge he seemed to possess. It all pointed to someone far more significant than a simple elderly alien living alone in a modest apartment. Ethan's curiosity only grew over the following weeks as he settled into his new position at Stellaris Innovations. The work was challenging and rewarding, the team brilliant and dedicated. But Zarek remained something of an enigma, appearing occasionally to check on their progress, but otherwise remaining in the background. It was during one such visit, about a month after Ethan had started, that he finally got a glimpse of who, or what, Zarek really was. The team had been working late, trying to solve a particularly tricky problem with the quantum stabilization matrix. Dr. Bennett had gone home, and Dr. Dean was in his office reviewing data. Ethan was alone in the lab when Zarek entered. Still at work, Ethan Cole, the old Vantaran asked, moving to stand beside him at the holographic display where Ethan was manipulating complex equations. Just trying to figure out this stabilization issue, Ethan replied, too focused on the problem to be surprised by Zarek's sudden appearance. We're close, I can feel it, but there's something we're missing. Zarek studied the equations silently for a moment. Then, with a gesture of his three-fingered hand, he rearranged several variables and added a notation that Ethan didn't recognize. Try it like this, Zarek said quietly. Ethan stared at the modified equation. It was elegant, beautiful even, in its simplicity, and it made perfect sense. But it utilized principles that, as far as Ethan knew, weren't part of current scientific understanding. How did you? He began, then stopped as he turned to look at Zarek. The old alien was standing very still, his amber eyes fixed on the equation. But there was something different about him. A subtle glow seemed to emanate from beneath his gray scales, and for just a moment, Ethan had the impression of something vast and ancient looking out through those eyes. Zarek, Ethan said slowly, who are you really? The Vantaran turned to him, and the strange glow faded. But the sense of age, of power contained, remained. That, Ethan Cole, Zarek said, is a long story, and one that perhaps it is time for you to hear. Zarek gestured toward 2 chairs in the corner of the lab. Sit with me, Ethan Cole. What I am about to tell you is known to very few beings in this galaxy. Ethan followed, his curiosity now fully piqued. As they sat, Zarek seemed to grow more solemn, his 4 amber eyes taking on a distant look, as if gazing into the past. I was not always as you see me now, Zarek began, his melodious voice low and measured. 500 of your Earth years ago, I was known by another name, Zarek the Magnificent, supreme ruler of the Vantaran hegemony, conqueror of the Orion Spiral, lord of 1,000 worlds. Ethan's eyes widened. You were what? I ruled over half the galaxy, young human. From the Thalassian depths to the edges of what you call the Sagittarius Arm, trillions of beings lived under my dominion. A laugh escaped Ethan's lips before he could stop it. I'm sorry, but that's hard to believe. But even as he said it, Ethan thought of the strange equation Zarek had just produced, knowledge that shouldn't exist. The unusual glow he'd glimpsed beneath the alien scales. The way others deferred to him. Zarek didn't seem offended by Ethan's skepticism. Understandable. Let me show you something. He reached into a pocket and withdrew what looked like a small crystal, no larger than a coin. Placing it on the table between them, he touched it with one finger. Immediately, the air above the crystal shimmered, and a holographic display sprang to life. Ethan gasped. The image was of a younger Zarek, still clearly a Vantaran but in his prime, tall, powerful, his scales a vibrant silver gray rather than the dull gray of age. He stood on what appeared to be the bridge of an enormous spacecraft, wearing ornate armor that gleamed with embedded technology. Around him, beings of various species worked at control stations, and through a massive viewport, Ethan could see a fleet of ships stretching out into the darkness of space. "The Invincible," Zarek said softly. "My flagship. The most powerful vessel ever constructed in the known galaxy. From its bridge, I commanded armies that numbered in the billions." The image shifted, showing Zarek again, this time seated on an elaborate throne. Before him knelt representatives of at least a dozen different alien species, presenting what appeared to be offerings or tributes. The Galactic Concord of 7,421 by your calendar. 17 star systems pledged their allegiance to the hegemony that day. Ethan stared at the images, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. If this is true, what happened? How did you go from ruling half the galaxy to living alone in an apartment in New Seattle? Zarek deactivated the crystal, and the holographic display vanished. For a long moment, he was silent, his four eyes blinking in that peculiar sequence. "Power," he finally said, "is a curious thing, Ethan Cole. The more you have, the more you fear losing it, and the lengths you will go to maintain it." He trailed off, then continued in a different tone. "I was not a benevolent ruler. I was feared, not loved. My empire was built on conquest, on subjugation. I believed, truly believed, that the galaxy needed a strong hand to guide it. That without my rule, chaos would reign." Zarek's gaze seemed to turn inward, lost in memories. "But absolute power corrupts absolutely, as one of your human philosophers once said. I became monstrous, ordering the destruction of entire worlds that dared to rebel, separating families, enslaving populations, all in the name of order and progress." He looked directly at Ethan now, and there was a depth of sorrow in those amber eyes that seemed bottomless. "Until the day I ordered the destruction of a small, seemingly insignificant planet on the outer edges of my empire, a world called Thalath." "What happened?" Ethan asked, caught up in the story despite his lingering skepticism. "The people of Thalath were peaceful, primitive by the standards of the hegemony, but with a rich culture, a deep connection to their world. They refused to mine their planet's resources for my empire, citing religious beliefs about the sanctity of their land." Zarek's voice had become very quiet. "I ordered my fleet to make an example of them, to destroy their major cities from orbit." The old alien's hands trembled slightly. "I watched from the Invincible as the first energy beams struck the planet's surface. And then, something happened. A flash of light, so bright it blinded sensors. When it cleared, half my fleet was gone. Just gone. And on my bridge stood a being of pure energy, a form I could barely comprehend." Ethan leaned forward, completely engrossed now. "What was it?" "The Thalithians called it a guardian. A protective entity that had watched over their world since time immemorial. It had never interfered in their affairs before, never revealed itself to off-worlders. But the imminent destruction of its charges had awakened it." Zarek's eyes seemed to glow faintly as he recalled the encounter. "It did not speak, not in words. But it showed me everything. Every life I had ended. Every world I had subjugated. Every family torn apart by my decrees. It made me feel their pain, their fear, their loss. All of it, in an instant that seemed to last an eternity." Zarek fell silent for a moment, lost in the memory. "When it was over, when I could think again, I gave the order to retreat, to withdraw from Thalath, from that entire sector. My generals thought I had gone mad. Perhaps I had, but I could not. I could not continue as I had been. Not after what the Guardian had shown me. So you just gave up your empire? Ethan asked, incredulous. Not immediately, no, but I began to change things. To loosen my grip. To allow worlds more autonomy. This did not sit well with many in my inner circle. They had grown accustomed to power, to privilege. A bitter smile crossed Zarek's face. Less than a year later, there was an attempt on my life. A weapon designed specifically to kill a Vantaran of my lineage. They thought they had succeeded. But obviously, they didn't, Ethan said. No, but I let them believe they had. My body double was killed in my place, and I disappeared. I had grown weary of power, Ethan Cole. Weary of the burden of so many lives. I wanted to understand what the Guardian had tried to teach me. To learn how to live among those I had once ruled, not as a conqueror, but as a fellow traveler. So you've been what? Traveling the galaxy in disguise for 500 years. Zarek nodded. Learning, observing, trying to undo, in small ways, some of the damage I had caused. The Vantaran lifespan is naturally long, and certain technologies have extended mine further. I have lived many lives, on many worlds. And now you're on a human colony, investing in quantum communication technology. Ethan said, trying to make sense of it all. Why? What's your interest in this project? Isolation, Zarek replied. It is the enemy of understanding. Your species is young, relatively speaking, full of potential, but limited by the vast distances between stars, by the time it takes to communicate across those distances. He leaned forward. Imagine if Earth could speak to its furthest colonies in real time. If information, ideas, cultures could flow freely across the void. How much faster might your species grow? How much more might you learn? Ethan shook his head in amazement. So this is what? Your way of making amends for your past. In part, Zarek acknowledged. But it is also selfish. I have seen what isolation and fear of the other can do, how it can twist even the noblest intentions. I have seen civilizations fall because they could not communicate effectively, could not understand one another. I do not wish to see that happen to humanity. They sat in silence for a moment, Ethan processing everything he had heard. It was fantastic, unbelievable, and yet, somehow, he found that he did believe it. There was a weight of truth to Zarek's words, a depth of emotion that couldn't be feigned. Why tell me all this? Ethan finally asked. Why now? Zarek's four eyes blinked slowly. Because the work we are doing here is more important than you realize. And because I have learned, over my long life, that secrets have power only as long as they remain secret. I would rather you know who I am, what I have been, than discover it by accident and feel betrayed. He stood, suddenly looking every bit the ancient being he claimed to be. And because, Ethan Cole, in you I see something rare, a genuine desire to help others, regardless of who they are or what they can offer you in return. It is a quality I once despised as weakness. Now, I understand it may be the greatest strength of all. With that, Zarek left the lab, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the knowledge that he was working for someone who had once ruled half the galaxy. The next morning, Ethan debated whether to tell Dr. Dean and Dr. Bennett what he had learned. But something held him back. If Zarek had wanted them to know, he would have told them himself. For now, Ethan decided to keep the old alien secret. The work continued, and with Zarek's subtle guidance, the occasional suggestion, the brilliant insight offered casually, as if it were common knowledge, they made rapid progress. Within 3 months, they had a working prototype of a quantum communicator that could transmit data instantaneously across a distance of several light years. The day they successfully sent and received a message between New Seattle and Earth's moon, a distance that would normally require minutes for light to travel, the entire team celebrated. Dr. Dean opened a bottle of genuine Earth champagne that he'd been saving for a special occasion, and even the usually reserved Dr. Bennett joined in the festivities. Zarek observed it all with a quiet satisfaction, standing slightly apart from the group. Ethan, noticing this, brought him a glass of champagne. You should be celebrating too, Ethan said. This wouldn't have been possible without you. Zarek accepted the glass with a nod of thanks. The achievement is yours, all of you. I merely provided resources. And the occasional revolutionary insight, Ethan added with a knowing smile. The old alien's eyes crinkled in what Ethan had come to recognize as amusement. Perhaps, but it was your human determination that brought it to fruition. Your species has a remarkable capacity for perseverance. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the others. Then Zarek said, "There is something I have not told you, Ethan Cole. Something about this project that you should know." Ethan turned to him, suddenly alert. "What is it?" "The technology we have developed here, it is not entirely new. A similar system existed during the height of the Vantaran hegemony, allowing instantaneous communication across vast distances." Zarek's voice was low, ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. But it was restricted to military use, to the ruling elite. I never allowed it to be widely implemented. "Why not?" Ethan asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Control," Zarek said simply. "Information is power. If all worlds, all peoples could communicate freely, share ideas, organize, it would have been more difficult to maintain my rule." He shook his head, a gesture he had adopted from humans. "Another of my many sins. But now you're helping us develop the same technology," Ethan pointed out. "And from what you've said, you want it to be widely available." "Yes, because I have seen what isolation does to societies, to individuals. And I have seen what connection can achieve." Zarek's amber eyes met Ethan's. "But there is a risk. There are those who would use this technology for their own ends, who would seek to control it, as I once did." "You're talking about corporations? Governments?" "Both. And others." Zarek set down his untouched champagne. "The Vantaran hegemony still exists, Ethan Cole, though much diminished from its former glory. Its current rulers would be very interested in this technology, as would the Moralian Confederacy, the Tauran Alliance, and a dozen other interstellar powers." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying we're in danger?" "Not immediately, but once word of our success spreads, and it will, there will be interest. Some of it benign, some not." Zarek's voice took on a tone of determination. "Which is why we must move quickly to establish this technology as open and accessible to all, before any one entity can claim control of it." The celebration continued around them, the team blissfully unaware of the potential storm brewing on the horizon. Ethan looked at them, brilliant minds, good people, dedicated to advancing human knowledge and capabilities. They had no idea of the larger game they were part of. "What can we do?" Ethan asked. "Continue your work," Zarek replied. "Refine the technology, expand its capabilities, and prepare for the next phase." "Which is?" A subtle smile crossed Zarek's scaled face. "Making it impossible for anyone to monopolize what you have created." In the weeks that followed, Zarek became more directly involved in the project. He arranged for simultaneous patent filings across every major world and colony, ensuring no single entity could claim exclusive rights to the technology. He initiated discussions with universities and research institutions throughout human space, offering to share the research freely in exchange for collaborative development. And he began to prepare the team for the attention that would inevitably come. It started with a visit from representatives of Earth's largest telecommunications corporation, interested in exploring potential partnerships. Their offers were generous, their language carefully diplomatic, but their intent was clear. They wanted exclusive rights to the quantum communication technology. When Zarek politely but firmly declined their offer, suggesting instead a non-exclusive licensing arrangement that would allow multiple entities to develop the technology, the corporate representatives became less diplomatic. "You're making a mistake," their lead negotiator said, a smooth-talking executive named Tyler Grant. "Our company has the resources to fully develop and implement this technology across human space. Going it alone, or worse, fragmenting the intellectual property among multiple parties, will only delay its adoption." "Perhaps," Zarek replied calmly. "But we believe the benefits of open development outweigh the potential efficiencies of a single provider model." Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. We're prepared to be very generous, Mr. Zarek. Very generous indeed. I'm sure you are, Zarek said, rising to indicate the meeting was over. But our position remains unchanged. After the corporate representatives had left, Dr. Dean expressed concern. They're not going to take no for an answer, Zarek. That company has tremendous influence, both politically and economically. I am aware, Zarek said, but they are not the only interested party we need to concern ourselves with. He was right. The following day, a delegation from the Earth Alliance government arrived, ostensibly to review the security implications of the new technology. Their questions were pointed, their manner authoritative. This technology has clear military applications, stated their leader, a stern-faced official named Commander Nathan Brooks. The Alliance has concerns about its unregulated development and distribution. Concerns which we share, Zarek assured him, which is why we are committed to making this technology openly available to all legitimate entities, rather than allowing it to become the exclusive property of any one group. Brooks frowned. That approach may not be compatible with Alliance security protocols. We may need to classify aspects of this research. With all due respect, Commander, Dr. Bennett interjected, this technology was developed privately, with private funding. The Alliance has no legal authority to classify our work. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan, watching the exchange, noticed Zarek's demeanor shift subtly. There was a straightening of his posture, a slight narrowing of his amber eyes. For a brief moment, Ethan could almost see the echo of the galactic ruler he had once been. Commander Brooks, Zarek said, his voice taking on that deeper, more resonant quality Ethan had heard before. Your government's concerns are noted. But this technology will not be weaponized, nor will it be monopolized. It is meant to connect, not to divide. To open doors, not to close them. Brooks met Zarek's gaze, and something in the old alien's eyes made him hesitate. That decision may not be yours to make, Mr. Zarek. I think you'll find that it is, Zarek replied quietly. After the government officials had departed, with promises to continue the discussion at a higher level, Ethan approached Zarek. They're not going to give up either, are they? He asked. No, Zarek admitted. The pattern is familiar. Power attracts those who wish to wield it. And make no mistake, Ethan Cole, this technology represents power, the power to control the flow of information across vast distances. So what's our next move? Ethan asked. Zarek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. We accelerate our plans, and we prepare for the possibility of more direct intervention. The next day, Zarek called a meeting of the entire Stellaris team. In the conference room where Ethan had first been hired, the old alien laid out a strategy that was both audacious and meticulous. We will be releasing all of our research, all of our technical specifications, into the public domain, he announced. Simultaneously, on every human world and colony, and to selected non-human allies. Dr. Dean looked stunned. All of it. But that's years of work, millions in investment. Yes, Zarek agreed. And if we do not take this step, that work may be suppressed or controlled in ways that betray its purpose. He outlined the plan in detail. The team would prepare comprehensive documentation of everything they had learned, every breakthrough, every failure. This information would be packaged in a form that any reasonably advanced technological society could implement. And then, using the very quantum communication network they had built, they would transmit this knowledge throughout human space and beyond. But what about Stellaris? Dr. Bennett asked. What happens to the company? Stellaris innovations will continue, Zarek assured her. But our focus will shift from development to implementation and education. We will become consultants, helpers, facilitators, assisting others in building upon what we have created. The team's reactions were mixed. Some, like Dr. Dean, were concerned about giving away such valuable intellectual property. Others, particularly the younger researchers, were excited by the idea of their work having such widespread impact. Ethan, watching Zarek manage these varied reactions with patience and wisdom, was struck again by the contrast between the galactic tyrant he had once been and the thoughtful leader he now was. That evening, as they worked late preparing the documentation for release, Ethan finally asked the question that had been nagging at him. Zarek, you ruled half the galaxy. You had technologies far beyond what we have now. Why did you choose this project, this moment, to reveal yourself and take such a public stand? The old alien was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes distant. I have lived many lives since I was Zarek the Magnificent, he finally said. I have been a scholar on Taurus Prime, a healer on Lyra 4, a simple farmer on Akaz. I have watched civilizations rise and fall, seen technologies come and go. He turned to face Ethan fully. But in all that time, across all those worlds, I have rarely encountered a species with as much potential and as much risk as humanity. You are young, by galactic standards, brash, sometimes foolish, but also inventive, adaptable, and capable of great compassion. Zarek gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them, showing the quantum communication network they had built. This technology could help humanity avoid some of the mistakes my people made. It could connect your scattered colonies, prevent the isolation and divergence that often leads to conflict. Or, in the wrong hands, it could become a tool of control and division. His voice took on an intensity Ethan hadn't heard before. I chose this moment, this project, because it represents a crossroads for your species. And because I believe you, Ethan Cole, you and others like you, will use this gift wisely. Before Ethan could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the building. Red emergency lights began to flash, and the security system announced an intruder alert. They've moved faster than I anticipated, Zarek said, suddenly all business. We need to accelerate the release. Who? Ethan asked, already moving to secure their data. Unknown, Zarek replied, his fingers flying over a control panel. But it doesn't matter. Corporate agents, government operatives, perhaps even representatives of off-world interests. The important thing is to complete our task before they can stop us. The sound of boots in the hallway grew louder. Zarek turned to Ethan, his amber eyes intense. The quantum network is already active. The distribution protocol is ready. All we need to do is initiate the transmission. He handed Ethan a small crystal, similar to the one he had used to show the holographic images of his past. This contains everything, all our research, all specifications, and a message explaining why we've chosen this path. Take it to the transmission chamber. I will delay whoever is coming. But Ethan began to protest. Go, Zarek commanded, and for a moment, Ethan heard the voice of the being who had once ruled half the galaxy. This is more important than either of us. Ethan took the crystal and ran toward the lab where their quantum transmitter was housed. Behind him, he heard the conference room door burst open, heard raised voices, including one that sounded like Commander Brooks from the Earth Alliance delegation. The transmission chamber was a small, shielded room at the heart of the Stellaris building. Inside, the quantum communication device hummed quietly, its core glowing with a soft blue light. Ethan inserted the crystal into the designated slot and initiated the transmission sequence. The device's hum increased in pitch as it read the massive amount of data from the crystal. A holographic display showed the progress: 10%, 25%, 40%. The door to the chamber slid open, and Commander Brooks stood there, flanked by two armed security officers. Step away from the transmitter, Mr. Cole, he ordered. Ethan glanced at the display. 60%, 75%. I can't do that, Commander, he said. Brooks gestured, and one of the officers raised his weapon. This is now a matter of Earth Alliance security. Step away from the transmitter, or we will be forced to remove you. Ethan stood his ground, watching the display. 85%, 90%. Suddenly, Zarek was there, moving with a speed and grace that belied his apparent age. Before the officers could react, he had placed himself between them and Ethan. This technology is not a weapon, Zarek said, his voice carrying that strange resonance again. It is a gift. and it is not yours to control. Brooks's face hardened. Stand down, both of you. This is your final warning. The display showed 98%. 99%. No, Ethan said simply. 100%. Transmission complete. A chime sounded from the device, and its glow intensified briefly before returning to normal. Throughout human space and beyond, identical devices, some built by the Stellaris team, others by partner organizations, were receiving the data. The quantum communication technology was now in the public domain, beyond the reach of any single entity to suppress or control. Brooks's face contorted with anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, Zarek said calmly. We have ensured that no one can monopolize this technology. Not your government, not Earth's corporations, not any alien power. He straightened to his full height, and even in his elderly form, there was something imposing about him. The knowledge is free now, as it should be. The aftermath was both chaotic and transformative. Zarek and Ethan were briefly detained by Earth Alliance authorities, but with the technology already widely distributed, there was little point in pressing charges. Stellaris Innovations found itself at the center of a global controversy, praised by some as champions of open information and condemned by others as reckless idealists. But as the months passed, the true impact of their action became clear. Research teams across human space began building their own quantum communication networks. Colonies that had been isolated by vast interstellar distances suddenly found themselves able to communicate in real time with Earth and with each other. Cultural exchange flourished, scientific collaboration accelerated, and a new era of human expansion began. Zarek watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Stellaris, which was now focused on helping implement the technology across human space. But he remained a presence, an advisor, a guide. One evening, almost a year after the dramatic release of the quantum communication technology, Ethan found Zarek on the roof of the Stellaris building, gazing up at the stars. I'm leaving soon, the old alien said without preamble. Ethan wasn't entirely surprised. He had sensed a restlessness in Zarek recently, a looking outward. Where will you go? There are other young species, other worlds that might benefit from what I have learned. Zarek's amber eyes reflected the starlight. And there are old wounds that still need healing, civilizations still bearing the scars of my empire. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and understanding. Will you ever come back? Perhaps. The universe is vast but finite, and my life is long. Zarek turned to him, his scaled face creasing in what Ethan now recognized as a smile. You have done well, Ethan Cole. You and your species. You took a gift and made it greater through sharing. We learned from a good teacher, Ethan replied. Zarek made a dismissive gesture. I merely pointed the way. You chose to follow it. He looked back up at the stars. That is the lesson I have learned in my long life. True power comes not from control, but from connection. Not from taking, but from giving. A week later, Zarek was gone, leaving New Seattle as quietly as he had arrived. Stellaris Innovations continued its work under Ethan's leadership, expanding the quantum network and developing new applications for the technology. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Ethan would think about the strange twist of fate that had led him to help an old alien pick up his groceries. An alien who had once ruled half the galaxy and who had, in his own way, helped humanity take its first real steps into that same galaxy. And sometimes, when he looked up at the stars, he wondered where Zarek was now, what young civilization he might be quietly guiding, what ancient wrongs he might be trying to right. And he hoped that someday, their paths might cross again. Because if Ethan had learned anything from his encounter with Zarek, it was that the universe was full of surprises, and that sometimes the most important connections were the ones you never saw coming. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.